All right, folks, here we are for the maiden voyage of the postgame show on YouTube Live. What do you think there? Everybody's excited about that.
Maybe cut the applause for this week.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't have the applause after that performance, but hey, we're here. We're ready.
Of craziness.
Yeah, I think we're. I'm hoping we can execute and do a better job than the Irish did today. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But while we get going here, I just want to start, Jamie, with your initial thoughts on this. Obviously, it was a frustrating game to watch. There's plenty of blame to go around, I think. Players got to step up and make some plays. Kevin Austin's got to make that catch. There's a lot of opportunities to make plays that I think the Irish players missed. But I don't think the coaching staff really helped this group at all today. I think that there was some real bad, questionable decisions made, and I think it really cost this team. What's your thoughts there, Jamie?
I think it really, when it comes down to, and you have to, it's in hindsight, it's 2020, but you have to look at it. It was an absolute mistake to start Jack Cohn. That's what it starts with, right? And I think, when you look at how they just have not been productive with Jack Cohn, and forget about, even if you just take off that horrible red zone interception off the board, here's the numbers. First 11 drives for Jack Cohn this season, 38 points. Next 43 drives, 57 points. Yeah. So 1.33 points per drive, which is like puts you in the basement in college football, really. It's bottom, not in the top 100. And then 37.2% of those drives have ended in a 3-and-out or a turnover. So even if you were going to say, well, I don't know if Pine had beat him out based on the whatever, now it's just so obvious now that you've just seen enough of Jack Cohn, and you can talk about the offensive line and all these things that are, the pieces that are there too, but Pine's just better. He's just better. And whether it's Cohn seeing ghosts or, him just not being mobile enough to, because I thought early in the game, he had some more clean pockets to step up into, and he made a couple nice throws, but they just were a different offense with him. And that's just really the way it's been when Drew Pine was in there. And I think there's a lot of things that you can look at within the game too. The decision to say, oh, it's 3rd and long, and we're going to give Buckner a shot here, when that's not what you were doing, even when in those other games, right? You were, bringing in Cohn, right? Or maybe you bring in Pine in that situation. The fact that you brought him in that mid-series there, which kind of stalled that drive, and that was an important drive, right? And
huge drive, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there's stuff you can talk about with the defense too, and I know we'll get into it. Obviously, they gave up the big play, and that was the big problem in the game. But, and we'll get into that, but the main thing is they were great situationally in this game, and, they held them when they need to in certain points, but, you hand them 10 points in a game that you knew was going to be this close, and they just handed them that 10 points. And what can you do? Even at that point in the game when it was 10-0, even if they made a quarterback change, I was like, it was just going to be awful tough after that.
Yeah. All right. I really have no reason to introduce the great Chris Zorich. Everybody already knows who he is and Notre Dame fandom. But thanks, Chris, for coming in here. We greatly appreciate you coming in and offering your thoughts. Chris, I want to start with you. Have you ever, in all your playing days, have you ever been in a situation where there was a quarterback situation like Notre Dame has right now? And I would just like to know your thoughts on how the players view this, because I think the fans, anybody watching the game last week, saw the juice that Pine brought. When he came in last week, everything just kind of electrified. All of a sudden, things that were terrible problems suddenly got fixed, and he moves the ball, and they score, and they do all kinds of things. Yet the coaching staff continues to play the guy that they started to begin with. And have you ever experienced that? And how do you handle that as a player? And does it really impact the locker room after a while?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate this. I think we're going to have a chance to have some fun because this is like literally right after the game and the
emotions.
The scars. Oh yeah, exactly. The emotion and the scars are there. However, I'm going to have to disagree with you guys. I'm a firm believer in Jack Cohen, and if you have a chance to have a quarterback that puts up the numbers that he has in the past, you have to allow him to do that. And I think the quarterback issue that Notre Dame has was only started by Coach Kelly. There's no reason for these guys to be coming in when they're in for a series and out for a series. I mean, there's no consistency. And the idea is if you have your number one quarterback, then allow him to play. Allow him. He's going to make some mistakes. I mean, no one's perfect. And I think that if he's always looking over his shoulder, then that's going to cause some issues. But if you want the other guy, Payne, Buckner, if you want those guys to be the starting quarterback, hey, go ahead, allow them to do that, or allow the coach to do that, but leave him in there. I mean, okay, so he throws an interception, that's fine. Don't pull him just because he throws an interception. I mean, how many interceptions has Brady thrown? And the list goes on. So the idea is if you go with the quarterback, you have to stay with them because that's going to show that you're unsure, you're not sure, and you're desperate for a win. And what that shows the team, unfortunately, I was on a team like that when I was on the Bears professionally. And Dave Wannstedt kept mixing quarterbacks. After Jim Harbaugh left, we had about 30 quarterbacks that Coach Wannstedt brought in just to see who we can win with. But that's the whole issue. If you find your starting quarterback, go with him.
Yeah, I think that's true in that you don't want to create a controversy before there's a reason to create controversy. And I think you got to stick with the guy that you named as starter up until the point where it has become obvious that it's ineffective. I think Jack Cohen can be a really good quarterback. I really do, but not behind this offensive line. That's just not going to – they can't move the ball with him. And we've seen it in Toledo. We've seen it in Purdue and Wisconsin, and now we saw it in this game as well. And I disagree that I don't think that Cohen should start now. I think if you make the decision, I agree with you, Chris, that if you do make that decision, then you ride with Pine and you ride with him and give him all the support. But you can't keep bouncing. You just can't. It will tear the team apart.
But he's shown that he's not going to do that.
But I know.
And it's not necessarily going to tear the team apart because the team wants to win. They believe in their coach. College is a little different than on the professional level because on the professional level, that's their livelihood. And they've been playing the game for a long, long time. In college, you got a bunch of 18 to 21-year-old kids, basically, who are going to listen to whatever the coach says. Now, that being said, but Kelly has a history of kind of changing quarterbacks and try to make something happen. And I think that's really what the inconsistencies are. In each game, I look at 4 keys for that game. And today was the run, how's the offensive line going to do, Freeman's defense, and the quarterback play. He needs to stop switching him. And we saw it literally in the first quarter. I mean, he's switching quarterbacks. And again, that doesn't show, in my opinion, great coaching.
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting debate because at this point, there's no question there's going to be a controversy as to who should play. People are going to be choosing sides at this point. I think it was obvious that Pine was the one who moved the team at this point and has for the last 2 games. But I almost agree with you. At this point, if you're going to play Pine, I don't think you put Buckner in the game at this point. Buckner's not helping you in the run game. I don't think he helps at all at this point. You got to stick with Pine and let him run the team. That's what's got to happen.
Well, sure. And then also, I mean, you look at what they're touting on social media, and I believe Cohen is a John Unitas finalist. Or right now he has the stats to be considered for the award. And it's interesting because the first game, I fell in love with him. I was like, oh my God, he threw almost 400 yards. This is great. And literally, what happens between that game and now, it's all these inconsistencies. It's the offensive line. They can't necessarily block. And so, again, if you're going to change the offense and go to a running style because your offensive lineman can't block, then okay, let's do that. Don't change. And I think at one point, was it the second quarter? I believe it was the second quarter. There were 3 different quarterbacks went in. It's kind of like, I mean, for what? You know,
I think they're looking for an answer.
Right, exactly. And you know, it's something to have a game plan, but if it's 17-0 is not that bad. I mean, you're in the second quarter, you could actually do some damage later on, and then they prove they can do that with Wisconsin.
Yeah. I think it needs to be, at this point, they have to figure something out because the offense is not working. I thought when they put in Joe Alt, I thought he played really, really well up until that last series.
Last drive, yeah.
Yeah, that last drive, I thought he really struggled. And you know, I think the part of the problem, Jamie, was they realized, hey, we put Van in there, and then we just kind of bull rush him. He's a young kid, hasn't had, and they just kind of bull rushed him a little bit, got him on roller skates a little bit, and you know, that's just the way it is. And I don't know, but I thought he did just as well as Carmody, if not better, for most of the game. And I think you got to stick with him at this point, or at least give him the opportunity because he has the feet at least to handle the outside edge. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, and Carmody didn't look fully healthy to me,
he didn't.
At least.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I think from what we heard before, he was gutting it out to try to play, and obviously everyone knows that Tosh Baker wasn't healthy, and that's why he wasn't playing. And that's one of the reasons why Carmody's trying to gut it out, right? Because they need him, right? And so, you know, I don't want to say it's like anything against Carmody, but I thought Alt was better when he was in the game. And I think overall, like, you'd almost just want to stick with him and get the growing pains. And the way it was I think they were in really tough against, I'm going to disagree with Chris about the 17 points in this game, because I don't think Notre Dame was going to be able to, with what they were showing on offense, they weren't going to be able, I totally agree with the mixing and matching the quarterbacks in the situation, situationally, but I don't think in terms of, they weren't going to score with 17 points to Jack Cohen. As soon as that happened, I was like, they need to make a change. Like, they weren't going to. And he just, I mean, since that Florida State game, he was lights out in that Florida State game, no doubt. But since that game, they haven't scored with him. They just haven't. And even in the Wisconsin game, he was not good in that game. I know he got replaced in that game because of injury, and that was the main thing that happened. And it just so happened that Pine did well when he stepped up, but they don't win the game without Drew Pine. They don't get back in this game without Drew Pine. So I think, you know, that's got a lot to do. I thought, you know, obviously Kristofic, they played on the last drive. They played him more in this game. I mean, offensive line, it's still a problem. And even though I thought there were times, especially because this is a front, and they really struggled with that TE, you know, they had that tackle and stunt with Myjai Sanders, and they just killed him with that early in the game. And that just really, really hurt them. And then Myjai Sanders is just a problem in general. But I mean, overall, I think in pass pro, probably the best pass pro game Notre Dame had all year, really, especially in the second half when you consider that, you know, I mean, Notre Dame has been giving up sacks against drop 8 before this game, and they weren't in this game. So, I mean, it sounds like a small step in the right direction, but it was a step in the right direction. So, I think there were things in this game that were better for the offensive line, and Joe Alt was certainly one of them.
Yeah. Let's switch to the other side of the ball. Chris, you and I talked kind of off the air about the evolution of the Marcus Freeman defense and what we've seen from the first game to up until this game, and kind of the progression. You know, all the big plays seem to be eliminated. up until this game, and then bam, here they are again, and really at the most critical time. And it. I want to be fair to the defense because look, the offense wasn't doing anything, and they got put in jail countless times as a defense, and it's hard. When you have a short field all the time, it's hard to defend and keep people out of the end zone. But I just want to get your thoughts on what you saw today on the defense. Should they share much of the blame on this? What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, I mean, obviously they gave up a handful of big plays. I thought the defense played well initially. They kept them to a field goal after that one interception. So, I mean, they have improved, but I say that with a high-pitched question mark because, I mean, the first couple games, they're playing unranked teams. They're playing a MAC team that they almost lose to. And the idea of this lights defense or this new defensive style, and I'm a huge Marcus Freeman fan, but the idea of not being able to make the big plays or coming up short, I'm sure it's frustrating him and frustrating us. Again, I like what you said about them being put in kind of rough circumstances, but as a whole, you just can't give up the big play. I mean, when way back 500 years ago, when I was in school, it really still's the same. I mean, the defensive goals are the same. I mean, no runs over 10 yards and don't give a big passing play. And they wound up doing that. And that's the hard thing. I mean, you can't constantly play catch up when you're in that situation. Has the defense improved from since what we saw initially? Yes. But it's not improving at the rate that they're going to need to win some games. We talked about this off air, but I actually am very fortunate to be involved in the Super 16 poll, and each Monday night at 7:30 on my YouTube channel, you just go to Chris Zorich, I rank the top 16 teams, and I've been so hard on Notre Dame because I think that they're a lot better, but they were out of my top 10, and Lord knows what's going to happen now.
Yeah. Jamie, when I watched the game, the D-line has been really good most of the year. I think we felt like they would be able to pressure Desmond Ridder a little more than they did. I think they did a good job in a lot of ways, but in other ways, not so good. But we knew we were kind of concerned about Clarence Lewis. Had a rough game last week, got exposed again in this week. We can say whatever we want about Desmond Ridder. Dude showed up, man. Dude made some plays, some big plays. And linebackers, not good. It just was not a good game. What are your overall thoughts defensively?
I think that's the one thing that stands out is that, you give up the big plays, but you also leave plays on the field when it mattered. And obviously there was, the one big drive. And J.D. Bertrand has played really well this year, right? So I don't want to act like he's, just because, he had one horrible series that he's been bad. But, I mean, this game was not a great game for him. And, that one series where he got out-leveraged twice. Certainly he got in on the blitz. Was it maybe a hold? Maybe, but you got to be, you're in, you got to make the play, right? You got to make the play. Obviously he's carrying the tight end down the field, gets beat on the seam ball, right? So, and I mean, even if you look at this, Kyle Hamilton got beat for a touchdown in this game. And I mean, that's not something you see a lot, right? Yeah. So obviously, Clarence Lewis gave up the two big, a 44 and a 45 yarder. But even on the first one, that's like Houston Griffith was over the top and he was there. Like, you got to make a play on the ball.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I think, has been the thing for me with the defense, as I think they play. I mean, obviously, yeah, pass rush on third down was really good. And it did affect Ridder for sure. Mm-hmm. They did a good job, but overall, the consistency there, it's got to be there, not just when you're able to pin your ears back. And so that, to me, that's a consistency thing. I thought, like overall, I mean, against the run, they were good in this game. Like they were good for most of the game, kind of worn down just a little bit at the end. But I think when it came down to it, you just can't give up that many big plays, and you have to be able to make a play when it counts, right? And a lot of those times too, even though they got stops in the red zone and then the kicker missed it too, I mean, they still gave up those big plays and gave Cincinnati scoring opportunities all those times. So yeah, good job holding and that kind of thing. But when you give up that many big plays, I mean, yeah, and then it is on the defense too, right? Like the turnovers were obviously in the first half. First half, they had one bad drive, right? But in the second half, if you look at it, I mean, they gave up way too much in the first half. And you know what? You credit to Ritter. He made some big time throws.
He did.
He made some big time throws, and he wasn't making those throws in the first half, right?
Yeah.
But, at the same time, guys were open. It wasn't like guys were just making.
He was just missing throws.
Catches.
Yeah.
He was missing throws.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you can't let a guy like. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just looking. Where's the leadership and the enthusiasm at? I mean, it's funny because as football players, you're always taught about leadership and culture and everything else, and you always look to when things are going bad, like who's a person that is going to step up to be that example, to be that leader. And anybody can cheer and get fired up when you score a touchdown, or you get an interception. That's the easy part. The hard part is when you're down 17-0. I mean, I didn't see anybody, talking to their teammates. I didn't see anybody slapping the helmets. I didn't see anybody yelling. Again, I'm old school. I don't know if they do that anymore. But the idea of trying to get these guys motivated when the chips are down, that's when champions are built, right? Because, I mean, anybody can give you a high five after you got an interception or you scored a touchdown. What's happening? Who's out there being a leader when you're down 17-0, or it's the fourth quarter and you're down? And I don't know if it's. I mean, I read somewhere that there's 7 captains now. I mean, I never heard of that. Like is it like a captain by group now? I mean, I don't understand that philosophy. But I didn't see anybody kind of take responsibility to stand up and get in these players' faces and try to get them excited.
I think, Jamie, that's a good point, Chris, and I think this is where you miss Heinisch, because he's
Absolutely.
usually that guy.
The whole time I was thinking about that, and obviously Kurt Heinisch is very similar to Chris Zorich.
Exactly.
In terms of
very similar players.
A guy who's going to, when the chips are down, he's stepping up, right?
Yeah.
He's going to step up in those situations and, do more than just, even just being a raw guy. He's more than that, right? Yeah. He's a guy who's like, well, guess what? We're losing right now. Well, next play, I'm going to kick the crap out of the center. Yeah. Right. I'm going to kick the crap out of the center, and I'm going to beat him so bad that everyone on the field is going to know about it. And that's where Heinisch, he has that there.
Yeah.
And that's why Kurt Heinisch, even though maybe the guy doesn't play in the league, but he has that. And there's not, I mean, Chris is right. There's not enough of those guys on Notre Dame. And I think that's another area too. And we've talked about it before, and it really hasn't hurt him that much because Bertrand has obviously played well, but you miss Maris Liufu. You miss him. You miss him because he is 100% that guy.
Sure.
It's like, you need to play. Who's going to be a guy to do that? And I think maybe Jordan Botelho later on is going to be that guy, but he right now is like running around, doesn't know where to line up, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's not there yet. So he's not there in terms of knowing what he needs to do on every snap. And eventually I think he could be one of those guys, but yeah, they're kind of missing that. And I did think that's something that with Maris that they were going to miss. And I do think they're missing that at linebacker.
Yeah. There's just not a lot of guys who have a lot of juice on the field right now. And that's okay. I mean, not everybody is a vocal leader, not everybody's going to be that, but you got to have somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is where Heinisch, where you kind of miss him, and it just is what it is. Now, Chris, let me ask you this question. Go ahead, Chris.
I also think that you can actually recruit that as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you see, and maybe the rah-rah guy isn't the 5-star kid or the 4-star kid, but he has that enthusiasm. He has that never let die attitude. He's the last guy off the field. He's the offensive lineman running with the linebackers. I mean, he's the guy who is going to work harder than everyone else to be that example. And again, I'm not talking about, he's going to point at Kyle Hamilton because he's a star player, but there needs to be more leaders on that team besides your star player. That's like saying that your quarterback is the only leader on the team. And if you have that, if that's your main focus, then you have huge issues.
Question for you, Chris, real quick. How do you go from a tough, difficult loss like this, one where you feel like you probably, if you just played better, you had a chance to win this game, and not make it affect next week? Because they got a hell of a game next week too, and they're going to have to step up and play. And how do you get them to bounce back? And as a player, as a leader, but also as a coaching staff.
Well, I think that there has to be some type of connection, some type of leadership where Brian Kelly's talking to Kyle Hamilton or Freeman's talking to Hamilton. Something's going on because there has to be that responsibility. And this is kind of a perfect example. I mean, losing to a team literally, and Mike, you and I talked about this. I mean, when they scheduled this game, they paid Cincinnati over $1 million to come in to play against Notre Dame at Rocky Stadium, right? So that's the first part. Before the season started, this was going to be a regular game for Notre Dame and a Super Bowl game for a bowl game for Cincinnati, right? And now it was reversed. It was a situation that we needed this game to be to have an opportunity in the top 10. So that switched. But, there needs to be a players-only meeting where you have your leadership. And I'm not talking about the 7 captains. I'm talking about, like, your true leaders on the team, if they have them, and really kind of talk about who made the mistakes where, and take responsibility, raising your hand and saying, hey, I didn't do this or I didn't do that. Because now I'm holding you accountable, Mike. I'm telling you to your face that, hey, I didn't play well on this play. I screwed up here. I was out last night until 4 a.m. Whatever it is, there needs to be that dialogue for the team first of all. And then there has to be this connection with the head coach to the team. Maybe it's a leadership council. Maybe it's the 7 captains. But Coach Kelly needs to call those guys in and really kind of have an honest dialogue about where we're heading. Yeah, he has more wins than Rockne, but when you're down to Toledo with 1:30 minutes left in the game, I mean, that really does make a difference. I mean, you're losing to a MAC team that, again, you gave $1 million plus 2 to come in and play you, and they almost beat you. So there has to be this accountability episode. Maybe that takes, a day. Maybe it's all day Sunday. Maybe it's Monday, whatever it is. But something has to happen because the players need to find out if they have true leaders, but more importantly, that they're accountable to each other. And that's what happens when you have a players-only meeting. And then that just evolves into better play. From a coach's standpoint, you obviously have to look at the film, but now you have to go back to the fundamentals. Why do we miss tackles? Why aren't we catching the ball properly? Why aren't we running good routes? I mean, these are situations that you have to go back in a very short period of time to kind of regroup in order to look ahead.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough situation. And I think that what we're doing right now is a situation where you've got a struggling offensive line, and that's I wanted to get into the questions because there are plenty of people in here. They have questions, so we're going to start doing that. Before we do, I wanted to mention once again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. Also, we have the chat open, so if you have questions, go ahead and ask them, and then we'll get to them. And we're going to start doing that right now. First question right here, putting up on the board is a question for the staff and Chris. Does Quinn bear responsibility for this offensive line and how they're playing? Jamie?
Of course. I mean, he's a position coach. Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, like he's not going to get a free pass. They're one of the worst offensive lines in the country statistically when it comes to like running the ball, pass protection, all these things. And obviously, it's not all just Jack Cohn and that. It's more than that, because one of the reasons I think Jack Cohn play declined was because he was seeing ghosts, because he was worried about getting rocked by the offense, by the protection, and they weren't able to run the ball to help him out. So, when you're like that, you're put into so many 3 and longs. And I mean, that's when the defense gets a tee off, right? And they get to show all these different exotics, and it's really difficult. So yeah, for sure, he deserves, credit. Like, we mentioned before the season, and it's something that we've harped on again. This line isn't as talented as a lot of basically every Notre Dame offensive line for the last like 6-7 years. Where how many guys of the starters right now are going to play in the NFL?
Yeah,
right. Like Jarrett Patterson going to play in the NFL. Everybody else, I mean, not including the left tackles and those guys, because I think they could eventually one day. But then, yeah, and then obviously too, there's the having to play 3 or 4 left tackles. I mean, no one's going to have a lot of success with that. But I mean, when it comes down to it, like this is kind of like it comes back to recruiting misses, evaluation. Did he do a good enough job developing? So yeah, all of that kind of stuff goes back on him, and he has to be accountable for it too. And there's just, I mean, they can't fire the players, right? They can't fire the players.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, like, I don't think when people say, oh man, this guy needs to be fired today, it's like, well, what is that good going to do right now? They're not going to have somebody in there to replace them. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure at the end of the season, if things don't get a lot better, I mean, it's got to be a pretty harsh evaluation, because that is a huge thing that has hampered the offense.
Yeah, no question.
Well, and a lot of it is, and I don't, at this point, I don't care about the NFL for any of these players, offensive linemen in particular. The idea that we're trying to get a first down or win a game is a little bit more important than somebody trying to make the NFL or.
Oh, I don't like that, Chris. I just meant talent-wise. There's just not as many guys that
He's saying they didn't have the talent to play in the NFL. So
there's not as many. And where the last year, you get 4 guys who are now on NFL rosters, and the 5th guy is going to be, and the guys like Josh Lugg and Kane Madden, I don't think they're going to play in the league. Like that's just where they are, right? So yeah, but I totally like questioning, whether or not they can get a first down. Yeah, for sure. But I'm just strictly talent wise, I don't think there's, the guys who are starting right now there's not enough NFL prospects. And Notre Dame, if you're O-line, you should have like 3 or 4 guys on every year who are starters. That should be guys that are going to eventually play in the league.
Chris, go ahead.
But a lot of this is coaching as well. And I mean, if 4 of your 5 starters went to the NFL last year, then okay, they're good enough. Then during the year, throw in these other guys, give them that experience. I mean, that's the most important thing. And this is the reason why I love teams like Alabama and what Georgia's doing right now, because you have these great leads, and they're throwing in their reserve players because they're getting that game experience, and then when those guys leave or graduate or do whatever, now they have folks who have experience. And so now, even though the returning guys may not be starters from your last year's team, they played 50% of the snaps. When you have a situation like that, then you're going to have a stout, strong, viable offensive line. And I don't think the coaching staff did that, and I don't know why they didn't. If they want to look to the future, I mean, if you have seniors and fifth-year seniors on the offensive line, then you need to sprinkle in some juniors and some sophomores to get some snaps.
Preaching to the choir for me, and this has been a problem, I think, for Brian Kelly for a long time. He tends to favor experience over talent, and Joe Alt being a perfect example of this. Now, granted, this kid's only a freshman, and as I told you, Chris, he's only played offensive line for 1 year before he showed in there. But you know what? You plug him in there, and talent rises to the top. It just almost always does. Now, is he going to make mistakes? Of course he is, right? Everybody makes mistakes. I mean, Zach Martin, when he first started playing, made mistakes. Chris Zorich, when he first started playing, made mistakes. But
Absolutely.
Talent suddenly rises to the top. And we see this with quarterbacks. We see this with wide receivers. We see this with a lot of guys. And a lot of these guys have talent. It's amazing that Del Alexander gets frustrated that his senior wide receivers are dropping balls and not doing something, puts in Deion Colsey, puts in Lorenzo Styles, they make a play. And it's like, well, look, man, play these guys. If they've got talent, at least give them a chance to show and prove that they have the ability to make a play. Because it may turn out that Joe Alt, he's ready to go. He may not show it every practice, and I realize people get frustrated and scared, and oh boy, he's going to give up plays. But gosh, when your left tackle's giving up plays anyway, what does it matter? Put a guy in who at least has the physical ability to make a play versus, oh, this guy's got experience. Well, who cares if he can't do what he needs to do? If he can't be successful playing, all the experience in the world doesn't matter if he doesn't do his job. Jamie?
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, you only need to look at Josh Lugg and Kane Madden, who, I wouldn't say those guys were horrible to today. Lugg certainly had his hands full with Myjai Sanders and as well, but, it wasn't like a George Karlaftis kind of game for him. But I mean, Josh Lugg has played a lot of football.
Yeah.
Like he has had a lot of experience. Kane Madden, 3-year starter at Marshall. Right. Yeah. So, Zeke Correll started against Alabama last year. Right. So, I mean, there's some of it, I do think I'm with you guys that these guys need to get more reps, and blowing out. That has always been a problem with Brian Kelly's teams the entire time he's been at Notre Dame, is games that they should win as blowouts. They end up being too tight. All of a sudden, it might look like it's like a 21 or 30 point victory in the end, but it's like that Wisconsin game looks like a blowout, but it's like the game was tight until like 4 minutes left, right? Yeah. So no one gets to come in and get reps, and that's been a problem with Brian Kelly's teams for years, is because they've never been able to like just stomp on the neck of an opponent and then get in those games where they get enough of those reps. And that I 100% agree with. But I think, a lot of the guys on this year's line, especially when you look at from, center to right, those guys have played a lot of football, right? Yeah. So it's obviously it's more than that with those guys.
They should absolutely play better than they do. And it just is what it is. I mean, if you look at Cincinnati doesn't have a bunch of NFL players on their offensive line, right?
No, not even.
They don't have, and they didn't have a lot of 5- and 4-star players. I mean, Lugg was a 4-star player for sure. All these guys are 4-star players. So the talent is there. There's no excuse. If Cincinnati, who also was replacing 2 starters, right, because they were injured, if Cincinnati can play that well, why can't Notre Dame's offensive line play that well? Chris, I see you kind of chuckling over there. Thoughts on that?
It's hard because, we recruit against Alabama, Clemson, and we just got beat by an AAC team, an American Conference team, where they're recruiting against
Indiana,
Toledo, Indiana. Yeah. Regional schools. Majority of kids are from Ohio, right? How are we in a position to lose against a team that may have, let's say they had 3 4-star players, Okay, we have more than 3. We have a bunch.
Yeah.
And so that's the frustrating thing, that we're losing, or we're almost losing to teams that we shouldn't. And on my my Super 16 poll show, before I started talking about kind of the idea that Notre Dame plays down to the competition, I went back and looked at the games that I played in, because I was like, man, I can't talk about, like, I can't dog games that, and I find out that, Navy almost beat us one year. That necessarily wasn't the case. Our closest victory in the national championship year, or no, I'm sorry, not our closest victory, but we beat Navy 21-7.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that was the closest score to a mediocre team. So I understand when people say, well, hey, they're playing down to the competition, but I understand that for about 3 seconds, because you have Oklahoma, who puts 60 on Akron, or you get all these other schools, and we don't do that. So is it our philosophy? And Jamie, you mentioned this before. I mean, Brian Kelly just doesn't put a foot on somebody's neck. I mean, why not? Like, is that against the rules at Notre Dame?
Well, I think part of it too was, Notre Dame philosophically, defensively, under Clark Lee and previous guys as well. It was kind of a bend don't break situation, and that allowed teams to have 12, 14, 15 play drives, which limits the amount of opportunities you have offensively. And I think that factors into it. And then a lot of times, man, to be honest with you, when they had guys who would be aggressive like Van Gorder or John Tenuta, they were terrible. They still gave up huge plays. And so scores happened. And so I think that those are kind of the two things that have fallen into it. But, there's just no excuse. Like I said, Cincinnati, they don't have the talent, as far as if you look at it on paper, their offensive line doesn't have the kind of talent that Notre Dame has coming in the door. What you do with it is something completely different. And obviously the Cincinnati coach at offensive line is doing a much better job than what Jeff Quinn is, because Jeff Quinn has far more talent, guys that everybody across the country wanted, and for whatever reason they just haven't developed, and that's a problem. And you could spin it any way you want. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, but let's go out and get that guy then.
Yeah, well, hey, we got to do something
more with less talent.
Yeah,
give me that guy.
Yeah,
because he has talent. He's going to kick ass, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's really the question: is that where do we fall? And I can't tell you how. Just I don't even have words for it. I was speechless after the who do we play? Toledo.
Yeah.
I was speechless after that game, because we probably should have lost that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, okay, that would have been a great learning experience, but losing to a MAC team, like, that's bullshit. Oh, excuse me. That's bad, right? Because what would that do to your program, right? So the idea that we have to literally take our foot and put on somebody's neck to prove that, hey, we're out there, we're trying to win games, we're trying to be good, we're trying to show that we can put up points. That's important. And is Notre Dame a top 10 team? Absolutely not at this point, right?
Can't be.
We can't have teams like Oklahoma putting up 60 points on a MAC team, and we almost lose to one.
Yeah,
then absolutely.
I don't know about Oklahoma. They have plenty of stinkers. We could throw Alabama and Georgia for what they did against, but OU has plenty of stinkers. So I'm not giving them. Too much credit.
He doesn't want to give OU the credit. Well, Ohio State. Look at Ohio State. Ohio State struggled. They lost early.
Georgia today.
Yeah,
Georgia shuts out the eighth ranked team in the country.
Yeah.
Right. They shut out.
I think though with the rankings, a lot of these teams are overrated. There's not a lot of.
Yeah.
So I think even though Notre Dame, we've seen the results. They weren't, even though where they are ranked, Notre Dame is probably barely a top 20 team this year.
But the way they're
And that's just a
playing, how could you argue? I mean, I think that
You
they can
can't. The
be better.
offense is not good.
Yeah.
They can be better, but the offense is like, below average at best.
I think
right
it's
now,
going to get
right?
better from here on out with Pine.
Yeah.
I do, but I still there's no excuse for the offensive line to be this bad, especially 5 games into it. There's just no excuse.
Yeah.
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
All right,
And
we got some more questions I want to get to. First question here is from Kyle. Quarterbacks aside, how would you evaluate Tommy Reese's game plan and play calling today? What do you think, Jamie?
I mean, if you take the shuffling in of Buckner out of it, but I think that has to be accounted for, right? Like some of those, I don't think those are the greatest decisions to go back to back, drives with him. I think that has to be part of the equation, right? So I don't think I didn't like that.
First drive, first and goal, run again. I don't like it. I don't like it.
I think there was a lot of things I liked on the first drive in terms of, they went
I think
Baylor
the creativity
splits.
of what he's trying to do was
And
really good. Yeah.
And I understand the difficulty of when you don't have an offensive line and you're trying to scheme around that makes it that much harder. And it's true, right? So, open up the game, Baylor splits super out wide. They get 5 in the box. They get a 16-yard run to start the game. Love that, right? Then later on, they have that same look, but then they have 7 in the box. Well, I mean, and that isn't just on Tommy Reese. That's on Jack Cohn. You got to check out.
Yeah.
You got to check out and you got to throw the bubble, right? Like that's so. I mean, that might have been one of the reasons why Jack Cohn got benched, to be honest, because that was pretty egregious. And I think there was stuff with the 2 back stuff today that some of it I liked. Some of the early screen stuff I liked.
Yeah.
It is hard to call plays when, your line is like it is, but I think you have to take into account the decision to, 3rd and long. It's like, well, we're sticking with Buckner here, right?
Yeah.
Or back-to-back drives going with Buckner, right?
Yeah.
Bringing in Buckner in the middle of the series. Those are big decisions. So yeah, even if you take out the decision to start Cohn and then maybe they went too late to Pine, whatever, even taking that off the board, the moving in Buckner, I think was a mistake.
Well, it was, and then you throw in 3rd and long. Look, if you're going to try and get a guy like Buckner throwing the football, don't do it on 3rd down. I mean, everybody knows he's going to try and run the ball. If you're going to make people guess at something, throw on 1st down, throw on 2nd down. Give the kid a chance to make a play.
Yeah.
And you just kill a kid's confidence after a while with that. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, but also I'd like to take it literally one step further. I mean, we don't even know how many snaps these guys had in practice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if Cohn's going to be your number one guy, you have a limited number of snaps that you have in practice.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming he's taking the majority of snaps.
Yeah.
So now, and even if you said, okay, we'll divide it up, now you're going to throw these guys into a game situation when they may only have had like 25 snaps during the week.
Yep.
So when they get into game situations, I mean, we blame them that they're not doing well.
Yeah.
And they don't even have the snaps. And I think that's what kind of goes into kind of what we were talking about earlier, the game plan. If you know that you're going to use 3 different quarterbacks, then I mean you literally have to divide those snaps up in practice, because even your starters make mistakes in practice. So if they make mistakes in practice, how do you expect a guy who's not a starter to go in there and play a perfect game? I mean, it's just not fair to him either.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it. Jamie and I talked about it really the last day of our show this week, saying Kelly came out and said on Thursday, Cohn started practicing more later in the week. And it's like, look, man, I didn't understand that. You can't, rep somebody a whole bunch of reps at the beginning of the week and keep repping them. And then all of a sudden you think your quarterback can play on Thursday and you give him some reps. This seemed to me like a panic decision to me to play Cohn. It was a total panic decision in that, we think he's good enough to play, now, but we just don't think that we have faith in Drew Pine to do this. Well, if that was the case, man, I just don't understand how you give Pine and Buckner all these reps to begin with, and then don't let them play and start the game. And that was kind of the thing that I was frustrated with. But what are you going to do? I think it was a bad decision, and Brian Kelly's going to have to answer for it. I'm sure he's going to be asked a whole bunch about it, and I'm sure he'll have his answer. But the reality and the results are what matter. And the reality and results are they put Pine in and things suddenly start working. And I don't know. He's going to be second guessed by that for sure. Chris, I want to ask you this. I think this is a good question. The stadium was sick. Fans have sold out. The admin pushed too far on season ticket prices. What do you think as a player when you go out there and you see so much red? I mean, that never happened when you were there. And obviously it happened against Nebraska that one game. And now they've kind of changed to this tiered ticket pricing. Way too many teams coming in and having half the stadium. Matt, one of our guys who was there, said Cincinnati fans were louder than Notre Dame fans half the game. If I'm a player, I'm very frustrated by that. What are your thoughts?
Well, as a player, I mean, you have to, from an administrator, I mean, you don't want to show your stadium with empty seats.
Yep.
So at some point, you're releasing tickets sold, and you don't care who buys them. Okay. So the idea is you just want to sell out crowd. Now, it's the coach's responsibility to make sure that they're putting a good enough product on the field that no one wants to sell their tickets. So I think I heard like on social media that an alumni or somebody, they were talking about the price of tickets and how they're pricing regular folks out. I mean, that's literally any stadium. So I mean, I don't care if you're playing at U of I, University of Illinois, or if you're playing at Alabama, or if you're playing at Georgia Tech. I mean, you are going to have, it's going to be tiered pricing. I mean, does Notre Dame need the money? That might be another question. But the idea of the Navy ticket costing the same as the USC ticket is gone out the window. I mean,
yeah,
they need to make money.
Sure.
So that being said, so you're going to have games. That being said, give me a product that folks are going to want to come to.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want to sell their tickets. I mean, that's going to solve that.
Yeah.
So from a player standpoint, we're not looking in the stands going, oh, hey, look at all the red. Oh, hey, I hear more fans than – I mean, we know this is our house. And before somebody else in a different color jersey or sweatshirt comes in our stadium, that's our responsibility to defend it better. So regardless of who's in the stands, I mean, we have to play, and it's our house, so that has to be defended.
Yeah, I agree. All right, here we go. Next question. Tom says, Kelly got seriously out-coached, and the team was outplayed. The defense was the bright spot. What do you think of that, Jamie?
Well, I think the defense was the bright spot for the game. You know, we talked about the big plays they gave up. I mean, when it comes down to it, just the decision to go with Cone, it obviously that's going to stick out in the game. And when you made the decision to go with Pine, and then you say, well, you should have made that decision sooner. And it was easy for us to say from the outside, because earlier this week, Mike, we talked about how, well, you know, it's tough because Pine had a very small sample size that he played in. And he did well in that Wisconsin game, but we were like, well, we don't know the sample size. And, you know, so they're looking at all the different factors of how these guys practice this week. But I mean, now it just becomes more obvious that Pine gives you that extra, the ability to escape the rush. Like, I mean, he got sacked once. I mean, could have been sacked a few other times, or even like it's not there. You know, it's not there. Just taking free yards, right? Mm-hmm. And also too, a lot of those balls that even though Pine, you know, they had some drops too, but like he gave the guys opportunities to make plays after the catch. And I mean, or the deep ball to Lindsey, like he gave him a shot at it, which Cohn hasn't given those guys a shot, and he's missed too many deep balls. So when it comes down to it, you look at all the different factors of it, yeah, Kelly, when he made that decision, so it's ultimately going to be on the head coach. So yeah, that decision alone would say he got outcoached in the game. And I mean, not to mention too, there's like, even at the end of the game, and I know the game was probably going to be over anyways, but it's 4th down, under 4 minutes left. They're not on the ball. They're running a check with me. They let the 40 seconds run out. That was, I mean, and they get a first down, but it was like, well, I mean, I guess maybe the game was over at that point, but it was just, to me, I was like, wow, this was a really dumb decision by the staff.
Well, I think for the first,
I was just pumped up, Mike. Like I said, I was pumped up when it was 4th and 10 and went for it. I was like, oh, this is great. It was in the first quarter. Hey, the first year, this is going to be great. We're more aggressive. This is going to be great. And we're going to have a chance to go out there and show them what happens when they come in our stadium. And then after that, it was like, whoa.
I think this is the first time that I felt like a team having a week off before preparing to play Notre Dame. This is the first time that I think it really made an impact in the game. You got to give the coaches at Cincinnati a lot of credit. They did really a very good job. I thought they had a really, really great game plan. And I think this is the first time in a while where I felt like a team who had a week off actually used it to their advantage and became a problem for Notre Dame. Next question. Oh, wait a minute. Wrong one. Guy was talking about your cigar. We'll mention that here in a second. But anyway, William says, personally, I underestimated their athleticism. I thought we would out-athlete them, but that didn't happen. That's a good football team. I to be honest, I was surprised too in that, the white kid who was torching, what's his name?
Pierce,
Clarence Lewis. I mean, that guy looks faster than any guy we got on our roster right now. I mean, he just absolutely was blowing by people. And I thought that Cincinnati had a lot of dudes. I mean, they had some guys who could play. It just, and I think that they just executed a lot better, especially at offensive line. And I think that's what do you do? You got to give them credit. They were a little bit better than I thought they were as well. And I thought that Desmond Ridder played better than I thought he would, and certainly held up and talked some smack before the game, and he delivered. So what can you do?
Yeah, but Mike, the problem is that those dudes you were talking about are 3-star, 2-star players.
Yep.
I mean, we're supposed to out talent them. I mean, again, they're not in the Big 12 yet. Okay, they're still recruiting. I don't even know who's in the American Conference. I mean, who's in the American Conference? Like Memphis,
it's UConn and teams like that.
No, it's UCF.
UCF.
It's a good conference. Memphis,
Tulsa.
Good, it's a solid conference. Like
it's not great though.
No, but it like the top tier of the conference is better than the worst tier of the Power Five. Yeah. It really is, right? And that's and they're obviously there. They're this is where you have to give credit to Luke Fickell, because when he came there and Tommy Tuberville, they went down the tubes with him, no pun intended, but they went way downhill with them. And obviously, with under Kelly and Butch Jones, they built it up. But Fickell has taken it to another level because they now have talent more than a lot of Power 5 teams. And if coming into this game, Mel Kiper Jr. just put out his rankings for the upcoming NFL draft and prospect, and they have 4 guys in the top 10 at their position. Yeah. And you wouldn't expect that. And yeah, these guys were 2 stars, whatever. Like Ahmad Gardner is a guy that me, Christian, and Matt from ISD, we laugh about all the time, because this guy was $130 and, sending DMs to Matt saying, hey, I'm going to go visit Notre Dame this weekend. And we were like, buddy, you're never going to play at Notre Dame. You're 130 pounds. And you know what? The guy turned himself in. I mean, they didn't even throw his way. Yeah. That's how he's been ever. He's going to be like a top 15 pick. Mm-hmm. So you have to give them credit for developing, but also identifying which of these guys, and they've they've also gotten transfers. Jerome Ford kid is an Alabama running back, right? Jawan Briggs was a very high 4-star kid, that was at Virginia, was from Ohio, had a Notre Dame offer. Malik Vann, I mean, he wasn't a guy that Notre Dame was only going to take, but he was a Notre Dame offer. Jay Sanders, like that guy, to be able to do that, and obviously you have to develop him, but they saw that he could be this guy. So, I mean, I don't want to act like they're not, when we compare them to Toledo, it's not Toledo. That Toledo game, give Notre Dame all the heat for that game, but they have some dudes on this team. They have some dudes on Cincinnati. That was a fast defense. They have a lot of guys who are gonna play in the league, and it worked out that they have had all these guys who are like 5th year super senior guys too. So they're built. This was their chance, and you know what? They took advantage of the chance. So more power to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, but again, I mean, if we're recruiting against Clemson and Alabama, I mean, we don't need. I mean, we scheduled Cincinnati years ago for a win at home.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what same thing like we scheduled Toledo, same thing like we scheduled Western Michigan, or whoever it was. I mean, they were one of the group that we said, hey, this is a viable team. We'll be able to put butts in the seats playing this team, their upstart team, again, years ago. This is something that we can do. So this is going to be an easy win for us, because at the end of the day, I mean, here's my thing. Let's play against teams that we recruit against. Okay, that's really the true measuring stick. Because if you only recruit 3 and 2-star guys, we're supposed to beat you.
Yeah.
But if Cincinnati takes somebody from Clemson or takes somebody from Alabama like we've done, we should win those games, regardless who the coach is, right?
Yeah. Well, if you have the proper coaching, I agree. If you're doing a good job of evaluating and you're doing a good job of developing, and I think that's what we're having here. I think if you look at this situation, right, if Notre Dame, and it all boils down to this, if Notre Dame had a better offensive line, they win this game. It's still going to be a tough game, but they win this game. That's really what it boils down to. And
what I'm saying is they should. I mean, it shouldn't be a cool game, even if they did have enough, because we're not recruiting the same guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they hung with Georgia last year, and Georgia recruits at a much better rate. So, I mean, I don't think you're giving enough credit to Cincinnati. I understand the way your line of thinking, but
yeah, what he's saying is Notre Dame is doing a poor job. That's what he's saying. Chris is saying that they've done a poor job of evaluating and developing the talent.
I mean, I give Cincinnati all the credit. They deserved to win this game. I mean, they did so much more with less. I'm saying, why aren't we dominating the MAC? Why aren't we dominating our opponents when we're recruiting 5 and 4-star players and they recruit locally?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I agree 100%. And it boils down to, as I said, O-line's got to play better. If O-line plays better and you can run the football in this game if you can pass protect, you look at the cone throw, you look at the Buckner throw, right? If those plays don't happen, it's a completely different game. But the fact that Notre Dame is in this position because of poor offensive line play, poor offensive line development, that's why you get into this situation. And it's not just O-line. There's certainly other players that have made some mistakes. And Notre Dame should have a better quarterback at this situation. But it's just not there right now. And when you have a weak offensive line and a developing quarterback, that's a recipe for disaster, especially playing a team who is actually pretty darn good. So, next question. Whoever thought we would beat Cincinnati, what were you thinking? Never had a doubt we'd lose this game. Well, first of all, I picked Notre Dame to beat Cincinnati, but I didn't anticipate Notre Dame turning the ball over in the red zone. I didn't anticipate them trying to make Buckner throw on 3rd down when it didn't make any sense. I didn't anticipate Chris Tyree fumbling the football, and I didn't anticipate Cincinnati's offensive line playing as well as they did to protect Ritter and having a good thing. I think that it wasn't that Cincinnati was better than Notre Dame. I think it was Notre Dame played very poorly in this game and gave Cincinnati the opportunity to win the game. And when it came down to it, they made the plays that they needed to win the game, and Notre Dame didn't. And that's just the bottom line. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
No, I think that's 100% right. You come out, you have a good first drive, you got to get at least 3 points. You throw a pick in the red zone, right?
Yeah.
You throw a pick in the red zone. So you turn the ball over twice in your own red zone, and you give them 10 points, right? And then Notre Dame outscored them in the second half, right? And so there's no reason Notre Dame could have easily won this game. They played bad. And they made mistakes, and they didn't make the right coaching decisions, and that's why they lost the game.
Yeah. I'm sorry, my camera died here, but go ahead.
I'm just looking at some of the comments, and someone, I can't see the name, but someone talked about, am I happy with the state of the program, and if true, then how do I fix the problem? No, I'm not happy with the state of the program. We're 4-0 by the skin of our teeth. We should have lost the Toledo game. Maybe that would have been a wake-up call. But the idea that we played for the college football championship literally a few months ago, and now we're in a situation where we're down. And again, I hate harping on this, but this talks about the state of our program when we're down with 1:30 left to Toledo with a possibility of losing the game. That's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm pissed. I'm very upset with the program. And how would I fix it? Well, again, it's back to the drawing board. It's recruiting. It's making sure we have a better offensive line. It's allowing them to get that experience where, like I said before, if you got 4 guys that are leaving, make sure those 4 guys are resting at least 50% of the time, because if I know I'm not that smart, but if I know I'm losing 4 guys, they have to be replaced by somebody. So I want to get those guys some experience.
Yeah. I think it's true. They really have to fix this, and they have to fix the development of this. These players have to be developed quicker. I would like to see Kelly, me personally, I'd like to see him take some chances. If Joe Alt can move and can play, take some chances. Sure, he's going to make some mistakes, but I think the ceiling of Joe Alt is higher than anybody else that they put in there at that time. And sometimes you just got to give a guy a chance. And I'm hoping moving forward that'll be the case. And that kind of drops to this next question, which is a comment where the guy says, Kevin Austin dropped a momentum killer. And guess what? He did it a couple, was it last week or 2 weeks ago as well? Had a bad game. Look, Kevin Austin is one of the most talented players on the team. We've seen it by just watching him and some of the plays he's made. But you gotta, when it's your turn, you have to do a better job of executing and making plays. So if I'm Brian Kelly, I'd do exactly what he did. Look, if you're not going to make the play, I'm going to put somebody else in. And I think that's the message that Brian Kelly needs to send right now to this team is, if you're not going to do your job, we're going to find somebody else. We're going to give somebody else the opportunity. And that's what it is, holding people accountable. But also, you got to give young guys who have talent a chance. And let's see what they do. And sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it isn't. But, you got to at least give them a chance. And to me, I think that Kelly panicked in this game by starting Cone. I think he knew that it was going to be a tough win for him and a tough game, and he wanted the experience. He knew that Cone had experience, has shown that he can make plays, but I think he just panicked. I think he just said, look, I don't want to take a risk with Drew Pine in case he does
try to
stuff.
Make the safer choice.
Yeah, in case he does stuff that makes us lose the game. Well, the guy he chose did plenty of things that made them lose the game. Or not, I shouldn't say made them, but made significant his play impacted the game, certainly in the first half. And it's not all on him. It's not all on the offensive line's got to play better. But Brian Kelly's got to understand that you can want Jack Cohn to be the greatest player in the world, and if you give him Jack Cohn's last year's offensive line, he'd be darn effective. He'd be a pretty darn good quarterback. But the problem is you don't have last year's offensive line right now. You have this year's offensive line, and you need to put the guys that have the ability and the chance to be successful. You got to get those guys out there playing. And I think that's really. Go ahead, Chris.
But Mike, at the end of the day, I mean, he's seeing a whole week of practice.
Mm-hmm.
He's seeing what guys are doing in practice.
And
maybe those guys had a bad week. We have no idea.
Sure.
So, and going into it, Kelly doesn't want to lose his game.
Nobody does.
Put the people that he feels are going to make him win. So whatever he saw last week in practice, he made the decision to start Cohn. Felt that they were going to give him the best chance. He was going to give them the best chance to win. Now, the question becomes, when there's some adversity, when Cohn faces some adversity, maybe then you automatically pull him. If every quarterback got pulled when they had a bad play, Jesus, it'd be the Wild Wild West.
I agree with that. I'll agree
I think it's
with
way more than a bad play, though. It's they haven't been able to score.
And look, Chris, I agree with you that Brian Kelly has far, far, far more information on this than all three of us talking right now. He absolutely does, and so does Tommy Reese and everybody else. So does Jeff Quinn when it comes to who he chooses at offensive line. But the bottom line is what happens when you play, because practice don't matter. It don't matter. Who makes the plays when you're out on the field? And we've seen in the last couple games, it's not Jack Cohn. It's Drew Pine.
Okay, I got to object to that, Mike. Practice does matter. Practice does count. You in order to be out there as a starter, you have to have a good practice. You have to play well. So practice does matter. You're facing an opponent that you feel you can beat. The idea of practice is to be perfect on game day. Okay,
exactly.
So that is important. Now,
exactly.
And they felt that, hey, this guy's going to give us the best chance to win. Now, they obviously misjudged Cincinnati because they came up with some stuff that maybe we didn't see, maybe we didn't expect. And that's, I think, in a game day situation, he panicked. But throughout the week, they have a solid game plan. They know that in order to have a good game, somebody has to have a good week of practice. You can't, these aren't the pros. These kids need practice. Even Rocket, even the greats had to have good practices in order to go out and perform on Saturday.
I agree 100%. 100%. But what you've seen is, okay, whatever happened in practice, you're not going against Cincinnati in practice, right? You're not playing Cincinnati. You're not.
Here's this one. I'm going to disagree, right? Because, and again, this goes back to recruiting. This goes back to everything else. Our players that the first team practices against should be better than their starters at Cincinnati, because we got 4-star guys.
Now you can say that, and when you look at the talent, but who's on scout team. The guys that are on scout team are freshmen who are not developed, right?
No.
Yeah, they're freshmen who are not developed, and then guys who just aren't good enough. And you can't tell me, you can't tell me that.
I'm to start at Notre Dame.
You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that anybody on Notre Dame scout team is as good as Myjai Sanders. Just not. There's nobody on Notre Dame scout team better than Myjai Sanders, or the corner that they faced in Sauce. Nobody's better than Sauce. So the ultimate result is what happened on the field the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks is what we saw. Yep.
Right, but I would beg to differ. That our second team, third team guys are probably better than a lot of guys in Cincinnati. So they should be able to practice. They should be able to have a good practice. Again, we have 4 and 3-star players that aren't starters right now that need to develop, but they're still good players.
So are you saying that? Let me just ask you this question: are you saying that if Jack Cohn continues to practice well, he should play, even though Drew Pine outplays him in the game.
I mean, of course not. I mean, obviously, if he performs well in the game, but again, I mean, Payne may have had a bad practice. He may not have been able to throw a crow route. I mean, we have no idea.
Sorry, I'm just going to interject because I just read the quote from Kelly after the game, and he said Jack progressed to the point where he felt that he was at 100% and he didn't do anything to lose his job in the Wisconsin game because he got hurt, right? So he got hurt, so we felt he got the first shot at it, like he deserved the first shot. Tyler, as I mentioned, would be part of the rotation. Obviously, we got behind and felt like we needed a change of spark, so that's why we went with Drew in the second half. So I think he wanted to be fair to Cohn because he obviously, he earned the job 100% over the course of the summer.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. Did.
And everything we saw and from what we heard, he was the better quarterback all throughout camp, through spring, all that kind of stuff.
Even what we saw, no doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And obviously Florida State, guy was lights out. And even the other games too, he obviously had that Toledo game, pops his finger out, whatever. Like, there's a lot to make you believe in that, and for Kelly to be supportive of him. So, I mean, I understand he didn't want to hand it over because he lost the thing to injury, but I mean, unfortunately, in this game, like, that might have cost him a chance to win the game.
I agree. I think that's the bottom line. And again, you make the decision. You should be fair to Jack Cohn. I mean, the guy transferred in. He did everything you asked, right? Did everything
he
you
won
asked.
The job.
And he won the job. And so Chris's point is valid in that you got to give the guy a chance. You can't just keep pulling him. But at the same time, if you're losing a game, right, and he's not playing well in the game, and more importantly, he's not playing well behind this offensive line, and then you have evidence that a guy who has been put in the game does play well with this, albeit not much, but you do have some evidence that he does. You got to pull the trigger. Now, should he have pulled the trigger sooner? Maybe. I think they probably should have put Pine in instead of Buckner at that point, in my person. Because I think that they really missed an opportunity when they put Buckner in there. If you're going to make a change because you don't like what's going on, and again, I think part of it is you want to get Buckner in the game because of the run game, all that kind of stuff. But I think if you're going to make a change and you felt like it wasn't going well, I think you got to put Pine in there. Go ahead, Chris.
But that's coaching, right? So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you're going to make that decision, hey, you know what? He has the hot hand. I'm going to go with him. Then you got to make the decision. Say, hey, he's my guy for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Don't pull him out and put him back in and take him out again and put. I mean, that's where it becomes inconsistent. That's a coaching.
Couldn't
issue,
agree
right?
more. Couldn't agree more. If you go with Pine, he shouldn't have put anybody else in, and he really didn't. Well, I guess he did the one time. He put Buckner in, later in the second half. But I agree with you 100%. And it's a wasted drive. Let's be honest. Buckner has not shown really anything as far as to be able to move the team since his injury, and because of that, I think it's a wasted drive on a situation where you have not many opportunities left, and you haven't had a lot of success, so it's a wasted drive. You can't waste drives in that situation. But
and here's the funny part is that everybody thought that Buckner was going to be the saving grace, right? We didn't even see Pine. We didn't even know. We have no idea what the hell he does, right? And then all of a sudden now he's interchanging three quarterbacks. I mean, look, I'm a defensive guy. I could talk defense all day. But I know on offense, you need that consistency. You need it's that work. It's the reps, right? It's doing that on a daily basis, every day, constantly, and then all of a sudden, you're going to sit there and pull a guy, take him out, put him back in, put somebody else in, take this guy out, put him in. I mean, that's the problem. It's a game day situation, and I know we're kind of going back and forth on this. But and I totally agree on what you're saying, but it's a situation where if Jack's going to be your guy, then do that until he messes up. Then when he messes up, put somebody else in, but don't take that person out and put Jack back in and kind of go back and forth. That's where it gets kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think what you'll see moving forward is he's going to have to pick a guy. So if he picks a guy this week and he's got to ride that guy, who should it be? Who do you think it should be?
But historically, we don't know if he's going to stay with that guy, right?
Yeah, we don't. You're 100% right about that. You're 100% right about that.
This is what I think is crazy, that coaches think that they're fooling the opponent by like not naming anyone until like so late, right? Or later in the week, or well, they have to practice. Bullshit, right? I mean, you have guys. If he's your starter, let him play. He may not be a great runner, but guess what? He's putting up 300 yards a game. Then let's go with him. That's fine. But when you make that decision, that decision has to be final, not necessarily for the guy you're taking out, but for the guy that you're putting in to give him confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, if Payne thinks that, hey, if I get a bad play, Jack is coming in or Buckner's coming in, then I'm going to be a little hesitant. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100% there. I agree 100%. All right, next question. Theodore wants to know, are Quinn and Reese really the level of coaching you need in a playoff caliber team? Jamie, what do you think?
I mean, if you're looking at Jeff Quinn this year, no, right? I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, last year the line was one of the top, 3 or 4 lines in college football, right? But you can't. The problem is you can't just have it can't just be a good line or a great line every few years. That you've had all 3 years. You got all these 5th-year guys back and all that. You can't be at that level, and you definitely cannot be at the level that they're at right now. You can't be bad and they're bad, right? Like you have to. I understand being average and then getting to good, but you can't be bad. I think with Tommy Reese, I think it's still unknown, really, right? I think there's a lot of stuff that I think Tommy Reese has done a good job. First of all, I do think the fact that the line is how it is, that's tough. That's really tough.
As an offensive coordinator, sure. I mean, what can you do?
And it makes his job much more difficult. And I think he has done and schemed up some stuff to try to create more big plays this year. And in that sense, he's done a good job in that sense. But I mean, I think right now you'll have to look at it, and I think you'll have to wait and see to evaluate Reese, whether or not, where he's going to be at. But, I thought his first year, he did a solid job. And I think he's got a much tougher job this year. And even if you look at it where the offense is struggling, he might actually be doing a better job than he did last year. It's just that the cards that he was given.
When I look at this offensive line and what they have right now, right? I think you could put about any offensive coordinator in the country with this offensive line, and they're going to struggle to score points with the quarterback situation they have and the offensive line they have. I think they're going to struggle no matter who the offensive coordinator is. You just can't be successful unless you have the ability to run at least a little bit, and you have the ability to protect the quarterback some. I mean, show me any offense in the country. I want to see somebody show me one offense in the country where they have to leave both backs in to block. I mean, show me any of them, and I'll show you an unsuccessful offense.
Great players that
you want to get the your ball best in players, their hands,
and you're using them to block that many times. It's a problem.
It is, and a tight end, you have to leave a tight end to block every single time, and to do that, you can't. No offensive coordinator is going to be successful doing that. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, this goes back to coaching, right? And if you're at Notre Dame, I mean, you have the chance to go out and get the best offensive coordinator in the country, the best offensive line coach in the country, the best defensive coordinator in the country. People feel that we've gotten the best defensive coordinator in the country, okay, or at least one of the top 5, right?
Sure.
So then the question becomes, is Reese the best offensive coordinator in the country? Who knows, right? Is Quinn the best offensive? So that's what you have to do, right? If you go out and spend a ton of money in getting the best D coordinator, can you go out and get the best offensive coordinator? But you have Tommy Reese, who kind of went through your system. He's a quarterback coach. Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and so even when they hired Tommy Reese, I was like, ooh, really? Like what you're saying is that Tommy Reese is the best offensive coordinator in the country. Or are you saying he's my guy?
Mm-hmm.
He's my guy. He knows my system. I'm good. Again, I mean, that's how you have to evaluate this, because you have the ability to go out and get the best coordinators in the country, because now, as we see with Marcus, they're willing to open up the purses. They're willing to pay for top talent. I mean, Marcus was between LSU and Notre Dame, and Swarbrick said, "Hey, money's not an issue." I mean, when was the last time you heard that about assistant coaches? For years, Notre Dame they've gotten a bad rap because they were one of the least paying coaches or paying staffs in the country.
And there's no doubt. And I when you look at the Tommy Reese situation, okay, it was certainly a hire where it left a lot of people scratching their heads, right? But you also got to realize, okay, well, he did beat Brent Venables last year, who's one of the best offensive or defensive coordinators in the country. He did beat him last year, and Notre Dame's offense did pretty darn well in that game. They dismantled North Carolina. So I'm not defending Reese and saying he is one of the top 5 in the country. I don't think we know, because this offensive line is so bad, and the quarterback situation is so up in the air right now, that this is happening. I think the wide receivers are good, but I think that they can play better. And this is where you're at right now. So when you talk about offensive line, though, there is absolutely no excuse to be this poor. There just isn't. And
Not to be this bad, no.
There's literally no excuse to be this bad. By game 5, you ought to be able to handle pressures up front. I mean, you guys should be able to recognize this stuff. You're not going to win it every time, but you should be able to do a better job than losing as many times as they do. You should be able to run the ball a little bit. Go ahead.
Is that a talent level or is that coaching?
Again, both. Both, I think. Yeah.
Well, broken record, but we're in this situation because they chose to keep their 5th-year guys in the full game.
Yeah.
So this is the results. I mean, you can get the top 5, or you can get a 5-star O lineman in there from high school, but I mean, if he doesn't know the college tempo, he's not going to do well. Yeah. But again, it's that experience. I think this all falls on coaching, because I mean, they have in the room on their whiteboard, they have all the positions, they got what years they are, how much they play, and everything else. Then a decision should have been made last year to get these guys' experience, because you can't throw a kid in there, first-year starter, or someone who doesn't have that much experience to play and expect them to play well when you didn't give them the tools. They may be the best athlete, they may be the best offensive athlete on the team, but if they don't have that experience, I mean, the experience counts for a lot.
It does, especially up there. There's no question. Jimmy, you had some comment you wanted to make?
Well, I was going to say, one of the things, the problem with the protection, and it does come back to the talent, because they're worried about their tackles getting exposed. So instead of Kyron, sticking in to, pick up a blitzer, he's all of a sudden, like chipping and then leaking out. And that's what they're doing. And then they're bringing that guy in delayed, and that happened, I don't know how many times in this game. And that is good game planning by Cincinnati, but that's a problem. And that's because they have to overcompensate because of the players that they have.
Exactly. The talent they have. And I'll say Joe Alt, I think, is one of the most talented guys they've had, as far as when you look at his feet. But the guy's a true freshman who's played 1 year offensive line.
You're not going to leave him out on an island.
He should never be playing.
Yeah.
He should never be playing.
Mike, you're 100% right. That's the problem. Yeah. He should not be playing right now.
I agree. He should never play. 2 years down the road, that kid's going to be a stud, I think. No question. But he needs a spring. He needs to get in the weight room. He was a tight end 2 years ago. So this is the situation they're having. And again, injuries have hurt. There's no doubt about it. Tosh Baker wasn't available. They're on their 4th left tackle. I mean, that's just bad luck. That's just bad luck. It really is. But You should have some guys who are ready to develop. And let's be honest, the reason that they're in this position is because they did such a poor job of evaluating tackles, right? A lot of the guys they thought were going to be tackles just aren't physically good enough to be tackles. They felt Josh Lugg was going to be a tackle all along. Well, he's playing tackle, but he's not physically good enough to be a tackle. Quinn Carroll, same situation. Andrew Kristofic, there's a lot of guys on, Tosh Baker. A lot of these guys are guys that they felt would be tackles, but they're just not good enough. And this next comment I think is really, really a good one. And part of it is the first part I think is a little out of character. I mean, I'm not sure that I agree with the first part. But when he says evaluating quarterbacks, Kelly has done a bad job, how can you argue with that, guys? I mean, if Ian Book is the best guy that you've had in the 12 years of Kelly, and I like Ian Book. I think he's going to be I thought he was a solid player. But is he an NFL, is he a playoff caliber quarterback? No. He doesn't have the physical tools to be an NFL or a playoff caliber quarterback. And, you had nobody else. I mean, the only guy that they've had that I think any of us would think had NFL talent was Deshaun Kaiser. When you look at this guy has a potential physical tools to be an NFL player. He's the only guy that I've seen that come through that had that kind of physical talent under Brian Kelly. And that's got to be, I think that's a valid statement. They haven't done a good job of evaluating the quarterbacks. Jamie?
Yeah, well, I think, sometimes too, they haven't landed their top guy at quarterback a lot too, right? So I know, there's only so many Trevor Lawrences that go around. There's only so many Justin Fields that go around. Well, you got to land those guys. And I know it's hard it's really hard to land those guys. But one of these days, you got to land one of those guys. And, Buckner is probably the closest to that in terms of ranking and all that they've had. Djokovic, close as well, too. But, when it comes down to it, you want to land multiple of those guys. So if it doesn't work out like it did with Djokovic, well, then you got another guy in the pipeline, right? Yeah. And that's what it's kind of like come down to and that's why one of the reasons why Alabama, even though they've been so good for so many years and so good at recruiting, well, now look at their run of quarterbacks that they're on, like Oklahoma too, right? Like even the fact that Spencer Rattler, isn't playing that well, we got booed at home and all that. Well, they have Caleb Williams, who's like a 5-star, top 5 guy in the whole entire class. He's next in line. And Notre Dame just hasn't landed those guys. They just haven't, right? So they haven't landed those level of guys or identified the other guys that have the potential to get there. They haven't done it. And it's a fact. And that's, like you said, why Ian Book is the best guy that they've had.
For me, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
So this is a shameless plug for my podcast. I have a podcast. It's called the Zorich Podcast. You can check it out on YouTube.
Yeah.
I had Tom Lennon on the podcast. And I asked him this question. I said, Tom, why can't Notre Dame recruit 5-star quarterbacks? And he said, Chris, flat out, he said, look, they start recruiting quarterbacks so late in the process that Alabama's already in there when they're a freshman. Clemson's already in there when they're a freshman. Notre Dame comes in late, like junior year, maybe sophomore. These guys are already talking to Nick Saban's already calling them as freshmen. And I think that's really kind of the problem that Notre Dame has at quarterback. Why can't we're one of the most storied programs in the country. We've been playing football since 1842 or whatever it is. Why can't we get a legitimate 5-star quarterback to be our quarterback?
I think Notre Dame fans have been asking that, Chris, for a long time. I mean, they really have. Here's my thoughts on it, okay? I'll give you an example. This is a perfect example of the way you should recruit. And we saw that today at left tackle, okay? Notre Dame took Joe Alt, right? because they missed at a lot of guys, and they missed a lot of offensive tackles. Here was a guy who was a tight end when they started recruiting him and said, you know what? This guy is 6'8". He's 255 pounds. Yeah, he's a tight end, but his dad played 12 years in the NFL as a left tackle, right? Or as an offensive lineman for the Chiefs. This is a guy who at least has a chance, right? If you know, and they said, okay, well, he may not look pretty now, but he has the physical tools to be a really good player if we just develop him, right? Notre Dame, when they recruit quarterbacks, they don't go and take a guy who has that 6'4", right? They don't take a guy like Desmond Ridder. They don't take a guy who's got a big giant arm that can throw it 70 yards down the field. They don't get the guy with the big stature, right? They don't recruit that guy. They take a guy that's smaller, and I love Drew Pine. I love Ian Book. Great kids, great, work their butt off. You want those guys, but they don't physically have the tools to take you where you want to go. So if you're going to take a project guy, to me, I think you got to take a guy that has the physical tools to take you where he wants to go. Perfect example, a guy like Drew Allar, Jamie. Should you take that kid? I don't know. Notre Dame didn't take him because he wasn't developed. But boy, when you watch he has huge physical skills. As you mentioned, Chris, they didn't even start recruiting a kid until this summer as a kid that, was a guy that they wanted in this particular class. They waited way too long to get in on this kid. Penn State got in on him early, and they ended up landing him. So to me, I think if you're going to recruit guys that are a project, a guy that just, maybe not be a guy that can come in right away and get on the field, at least he's got to have the physical tools to be successful. And I think at quarterback, they haven't done a very good job of that. Jamie?
One thing I'll say too about what Chris said about them not offering soon enough, and Alabama's doing that, and that was 100% true.
Amen.
But I think they have, because they've offered a bunch of 2024 kids this year, and that is something they never did.
Yeah, I agree.
Before. So they have adjusted, and I don't know if that's Tommy Reese who's leading that, or if that's in the personnel department or whoever, but they have adjusted. The problem is it's like year 12 of Brian Kelly. Like, would have been nice to happen quite a bit sooner, right? Because they were just late to it compared to a lot of these other schools. And that's, even if you look at Deshaun Watson at Clemson, like the reason he ended up at Clemson, and Clemson didn't have like this unbelievable quarterback, history before Deshaun Watson got there. Taj Boyd was the guy there before, but he certainly wasn't Watson level, and they were on him as a freshman, right? And that's how they ended up. Chad Morris was on him as a freshman. That's how they ended up landing him, right? And there needs to be more of that, right? And sometimes you're going to be on a freshman and the guy doesn't develop like you want to, but a lot of those times those guys do. Those guys who are elite blue chip guys that show out all the way, and they have those traits exactly like you said, Mike. And you're betting on those traits, and then you can develop everything else around it.
Yeah. I think go ahead, Chris.
Well, what you were talking about, as your quarterback, do you want to recruit a project? Do you want to sit there and say, well, we can mold them, we can do this, we can teach them, we can do that?
No.
Because, right. And so if that's not going to happen, then you need to go out there and hey, man, follow Nick Saban, man, follow Dabo, do whatever you need to do, and come in, knock on the door third, and say, hey, and that's why I think Marcus is they started to get some 5-star defensive players, because Marcus kind of has this new recruiting attitude. Again, he was on my podcast, and he talked about this. He said, look, Chris, I'm not looking for those Notre Dame kids anymore. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on now. What did you say? He said, I'm not looking for Notre Dame men. I'm like, whoa, hold on now. Understand that what you're saying is blasphemy for the Notre Dame community. You know that, right? He's like, Chris, I'm looking at the best possible players. The best possible players. Now let's bring them in Let's see how they like Notre Dame, see if they like it, and then let's talk to them. That's totally different than what they've done in the past. In the past, they said, we don't want to talk to that guy. That guy, and we're not sure about that. No, let's bring them all in and then start evaluating at that point. Now, that's new. And as Jamie was talking about, that's how they're getting these class of 24 guys coming in, because now they're doing that. They're going out there. And, Marcus couldn't say names, but he talked about how Coach Kelly, they wound up getting someone. And Coach Kelly kind of honestly said, man, Marcus, had you not been here, we would have never talked to that guy.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example, right? So let's have this different, this new recruiting philosophy on quarterbacks.
Yeah. I think you look at the quarterback situation, okay, and I agree with you, and I have a bunch of points I want to add to that and add on to that. When you look at the quarterback situation, if you follow recruiting as closely as Jamie and I do, in every class, there's probably maybe, 3-4 guys that you're like, okay, this guy's going to be elite, right? It's just obvious that that's going to be the guy. Well, if you don't get that guy, then pretty much everybody else is literally a project, right? And so it's a matter of finding which kind of project you want. And I love Drew Pine. Love him, right? Guy's 5'11". Is that the kind of guy that you need to recruit? And I think Drew Pine's going to come in and he's going to play, and he may even play better than Ian Book. It would not surprise me in the end. He's a gamer. He's a guy that can, and I don't mind taking a Drew Pine at all, right? If the next guy, I should say, I don't mind taking a Pine at all as long as the guy in front of him has that ability, right? Those physical tools we're talking about. And then the guy behind him also has those physical tools. That hasn't been the case at all. And so that, I think, has been the problem of why Notre Dame hasn't been able to do this. Now, and trust me, because I've dealt with recruiting for so long, you are 100% right. And I used to have these conversations with people and say, why aren't you offering early? Well, because we have to investigate. We got to check their grades. We got blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, I understand that, but it doesn't hurt to offer somebody, right? If it doesn't work out, you don't have to take them. You don't have to take them. And yeah, but we don't want to waste about. And it's like, look, what does it hurt to offer somebody? It doesn't hurt anything, right? Get them on campus, investigate, find out. Why is it that Stanford, which is a hell of a lot harder to get into, plus you got to do a whole lot more to get into it, can offer all these people, but Notre Dame can't? It doesn't make sense to me. And it's just because you have your system, but the system is failing. And I think Notre Dame is adjusted to it. Now, let me say this, and I think that people haven't thought about this, and I wonder if Notre Dame has too. They were very afraid to bring in some of the people, like you said, Chris, some of these guys who weren't necessarily Notre Dame guys, right? And the reason why they were afraid is because those guys stick around and they get in the papers and they do a bunch of things. They become a problem and they drag you down, right? And I'm sure you've been around guys that were just bad apples that really kind of hurt the program or hurt the team, because of their attitude or things like that. Well, guess what? Transfer portal doesn't matter now, right? You can push those people out the door. You can push them out the door much easier than Notre Dame used to be able to do that. And look, the kids, they would stick around because their parents would say, oh, you got to give it a chance. And plus you're going to lose a year if you transfer, and you got to give it a chance and blah, blah, blah. And so they were stuck with these guys for 2 or 3 years. They got nothing out of them because, they were always in trouble. They were always suspended. They were never, it was a waste of a scholarship for 3 years because these guys just couldn't stay eligible and they were bad apples. But with a new transfer rule and transfer portal, now you can take more of those chances because they're gonna want to get out. If they can't play and they're suspended and they're always in trouble, they're gonna want to get out, and the transfer portal gives them the opportunity to get out now. And you're gonna see that. You're gonna see a lot of guys. We know, Jamie and I know guys who are somewhat questionable, a lot of people were questioning us about a guy like, say, Jordan Johnson, who was here at Notre Dame. And people said, well, they just need to get him on the field. Got to get him on the field. And we would tell him, well, yeah, he was a 5-star by somebody's ranking. But when you watch him on the field, he's not a 5-star player. But it was the problems he was having, that was keeping him off the field. And it wasn't, necessarily all off the field stuff. There were other things that were going on as well. And sure enough, he transferred to Central Florida, and everybody's like, they should have got him on the field. He's at Central Florida. Does he even have a catch yet, Jamie? I'm not even sure he has one catch.
No, so I'm not. He's not really playing. He's not starting. That's
yeah,
for sure.
Exactly. So the point being, we know about a lot of these guys, and they'll be gone, just like Jordan Johnson was, and all these other guys. If they don't play right away, boom, they're gone. So you can take some chances on some of these guys, like Marcus is talking about. You can take a chance now, where before I think they were a little bit afraid to do that. Chris, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, you guys obviously know more about recruiting than I do.
Sure,
but I think what you're saying, those are extreme cases, right? I mean, you can't tell me that every 5-star athlete that Notre Dame would bring in here would be a problem. Okay, so that's a very small percentage. Now, it may seem like a lot because it's a big name player, but you still have the 5-star, the 4-star great players who Notre Dame wasn't recruiting before, who aren't going to be a problem. And that's I think what Marcus was talking about, because when we were on my podcast, I referenced, well, what about Oklahoma getting all those cars out there? And I think they had like it was like a recruiting day where they had players, and this surprised me. Marcus said, if we need to bring cars in, let's bring cars at Notre Dame. Yeah. Let's do what the other schools are doing, so we can get these guys here and show them what we have. Because what he pointed out was, you want to compete for national championship? We've been in the hunt for 2 out of the last 3-4 years, I think. You want the opportunity to go pro? We have more pros drafted in the NFL. And then what we're going to offer you is something that no one else can offer you, which is literally an international degree. So now you want to go pro? Hey, we have highly like, you want to compete for, you want to be in the in the championship playoffs? We're there. Now, but again, that's something different. That, I mean, I was kind of laughing and chuckling, saying that let's bring cars to Notre Dame. Why not? If it's going to bring those kids here, and again, they're all not going to be bad apples who are these great players.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Then let's do that.
No, I agree. And I think you got to look, the best way, you can hear what everybody else says about somebody, but the best way to figure out who somebody is to meet them, have a discussion with them. If you are an evaluator of talent and personality and things like that, you should be able to find some guys. And so go ahead.
But Mike, I think that's the problem that Notre Dame hasn't done before. They weren't even willing to go out and have those conversations with these kids.
Agree 100%. And I think you're right. You're absolutely right on that. So, all right, let's see. We get some more comments here. Boy, we got a ton of comments in the chat here, and I'm trying to find. It seems like more people are commenting than they are asking questions. So, if you got a question for Chris or you got a question for Jamie and I, feel free to pop them in there. I don't want to get through. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see. Yeah, it seems like more people are arguing amongst themselves in the chat than they are.
Sounds like a Notre Dame loss.
Yeah, it definitely does, which is why we do this. That's exactly why we do this. So, So again, if people have some questions, let us know. Hang on. Yeah, again, it's more people arguing than asking us questions. So if you have some questions, feel free. And maybe they asked them and we haven't. Let's see. Yeah, again, it's just people talking. All right. So let me ask you this question, guys. If you're Brian Kelly, right, and you've now lost a game, and what was working wasn't working, and you've lost a game, so the chances of you getting in the playoff are probably slim and none. What kind of changes would you make? We'll start with you, Jamie. What kind of changes would you make? Would you take some chances and give some guys some young guys, talent guys? Would you give them a chance? What would you do at quarterback? What would you do at O-line? And then, just looking at the future, how would you handle this? What would you do?
Well, I think you obviously got to make the switch to Drew Pine at quarterback. I think that's fairly obvious at this point. I would maybe, because you're going to go with Pine, I would go back on what you were doing with Buckner. I'm not to say that you might not want to have that package, but I wouldn't have that as an automatic, like they're doing. Like, say, like I feel like they are planning it like third series, Buckner goes in. Like, I think it should be more situational if they're going to do that. So it's, I mean, if you're going to get into a situation where it's, first and goal on the 4-yard line, and you want to bring Buckner in and give that, okay, whatever, that kind of look, something like that, or, bring him in short yardage or whatever. Like, if you want to do that kind of thing, fine. But I don't think how they are, like, let Drew run the offense. I think you have to look at O-line and, who's healthy. And I mean, that's the big problem, is that they just haven't been healthy. But
not a lot of changes you could make, really.
Well, I think you look at Kristofik. I'll have to go back and watch it and to see how he did in the game. But Kristofik and Alt are the guys that would get elevated. Right now you have Virginia Tech coming up, and then you have the open week, right? You have the bye week. So I think you look at it from that perspective. On defense, I don't know if there's too many personnel changes you make. I think there's got to be a certain point too. Like, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but the decision to go, I mean, I don't mind when they run Dollar in certain positions, but they backed off and ran Dollar in that end of the first half. And that was just like, I have no idea why they did that. And that
marched right down
that
and,
really,
and I mean, that 7 points was just, it was a backbreaker.
Well, and then all of a sudden they got inside the 30-yard line. Then they go, okay, well, now we're 4 down and we're going to bring the blitz. Like, that to me was very what a Clark Lee situation, right? Where how he used to kind of play it. And I think Marcus Freeman has to kind of be himself. And when they're, continued, there was no reason to stop doing what they were doing. So if I would, if I'm looking on that side of the ball, I'd look at reinforce what we do well and concentrate on that. And I think you have to look at, I think if they had somebody else on the boundary, they say, like, to replace Clarence Lewis after him having a tough game, I think they do it. I think this is who they got there. Right. So, I certainly don't think, Ramon Henderson, obviously he had a game to forget too with some bonehead plays, but so they don't really have somebody right there. And then other than that, like, you say JD Bertrand didn't have the greatest game, whatever. It's like, well, the guy has to play every play because they don't have anybody else at will linebacker. Right. So a lot of the things on defense, I think, just hammer what you're doing well and keep pushing that.
One thing, and I have a question for Chris after this, but one thing I think that they need to do defensively, besides the dollar, is what you're talking about. The end of the game, right? The end of the game when you've got Cincinnati driving, I look out there and I see a rotation of Alex Ernsberger and Riley Mills. They're at the 30-yard line, Notre Dame's 30-yard line. Those two guys are in there playing. Now, I realize you want to rotate guys. You want to keep them fresh. I get it. It's 4 minutes left to go in the game.
Yeah.
You can't.
That's always been a Mike Elston thing.
You can't
screw the rotation. Yeah.
Screw the rotation at that point. This is the game. The game is on the line. Alex Ernsberger, probably going to be a pretty good player. Riley Mills, same. But that's not who you want in the game at that point.
In those situations,
exactly.
And right after Foskey had the strip sack, had the other play where he blew it up. I mean, you roll.
Foskey would have found the energy. I guarantee you would have found the energy to finish the game. So would have everybody else. Chris, they would have taken you out in that situation. You would have been madder than hell.
I've been taken out in situations like that before. I know you talked about before kind of what you do, and I love cherry pie, right? I make a ton of cherry pies, And this reminds me, you just throw a whole bunch of stuff in the mix and see what happens, right? So right now, what Brian Kelly has to do is first find out what his mission is. Well, what is his goal right now? I mean, do you still have a chance to be top 10? Absolutely you do. So, I mean, when I say throw everything in the mix, everything's on the table now. So I'm talking to coaches, I'm talking to players, and are we going to win the national championship? Absolutely not. But we have a chance to go to a good bowl. I mean, the season is still salvageable. I mean, right now we're arguing because in the last, half a year or 8 months, Notre Dame has lost 3 games. Okay, again, that's not a bad thing. It's still a good thing. But what he needs to do is literally evaluate every position on offense and defense, evaluate how the coaches are coaching, and come up with something different. Because this loss is going to be hard. This loss, and when you lose at Notre Dame, you're out of the hunt. So you got to motivate these kids in a different way. There's no division championship. There's no conference championship anymore. They know they're out. And so it's going to be a hard sell, but you have to do this as the coach to now be able to go out there and perform every week like you're a Notre Dame team. That's the challenge.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you really got to address this too, because I think what you need to, if you're Brian Kelly, you need to put that question to the players too. What do you want to accomplish the rest of this year? All right. And I think that question, you need to challenge your leadership. You need to say, look, guys, you guys are seniors, right? A lot of you guys are seniors. This is your last year. So you decide how well this ends, right? And if you do your job, it's going to end well. But if guys aren't going to play hard or they're going to do some stuff, we gotta make some changes. And so hopefully that's what we'll see, and we'll go from there. Got a couple of questions. First, people want to know what cigar you're smoking and what's in the red cup, Chris.
Well, I am an adult.
Yeah.
I am 52.
Yes.
I love La Gloria Cubana. It's a Series R. I finished that one. There's another one, but that's my favorite that I enjoy. And in the cup, it's kind of interesting. I was doing Jack and Diet, but I ran out. I didn't want to leave the frame. I ran out of ice, so now I'm just drinking Coke Zero. So
there you go. All right. Let's see here. Let's answer a couple questions, and we'll wrap it up. We got stuff we got to do. Well, this is a good question. Hang on, we'll put this one up here. If not, I think he's talking about if it wasn't Brian Kelly's buddy who would have this job. I think he's talking about Jeff Quinn at this point. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know who could be an option there. I really, honestly have. I just don't even know what to say there. So,
here's what you do: you go and call the offensive line coach for Alabama and say, how much?
Yeah, well, good luck on that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got the money, but
Well, wait. So now you're saying Notre Dame doesn't have the money.
Well, I'm not saying they don't have the money. Right. It's just you better have.
They don't want to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, again, that's the larger picture, right?
Amen to that. I tell you what may make more sense is you call the guy in Alabama and say, okay, we'll offer you whatever amount you need if you want to come. And when you say no, then we want to know who you would hire. You know what I mean? I would take that approach because the guy obviously knows what the hell he's doing. So any thoughts from you, Jamie?
I mean, I think it's the one thing about Alabama is they've had a lot of offensive line coaches.
They have.
Under
It's
Nick
just a
Saban.
system.
They turn over, and I mean, one thing you say, he obviously gets really good coaches.
Yeah.
And
Well, who
and
wouldn't
he
want to
coaches
coach them?
them hard, and he coaches them hard.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So that's the thing. He's demanding of
Exactly.
that. So
that's why they have success. That's exactly why they have success.
100%, right?
Yep.
And that's also why guys don't last there for long, because
they don't want to deal it
past their limits, and then they're like,
choose them up.
2 years is good. I'm good. I'm going to go somewhere else, right?
If I could just jump in here for a second, Jamie, which I think is more of a challenge for Nick Saban in Alabama, because as we all hate them, just like we as fans, and I don't personally hate them, but as fans, we hate Alabama, we hate New England, right? But imagine the challenges they have. Not only are they ranked number one week in and week out, which is a challenge in itself. I had to do it for 23 weeks. It's a bitch. It's crazy. But now he has to deal with getting new coaches in and out. What?
Yeah.
I mean, he just lost offensive coordinator to Texas. Texas. What?
Yeah. Well, and it's every year. It's every year. And that's why he's the greatest there ever was. I have never seen a guy who could maintain a culture at that level. And it is remarkable. I cannot stand the man. I don't like him personally, but he's the best coach that ever lived. And it's by a very, very, very large margin. This is a good question here. All right. Mike, what are the answers for the defense giving up scores are the most important, the inopportune moments, right before the half, end of the game, after finally the offense finally starts to click? Jamie, I've been preaching this since FSU, and it seems like they're waiting for the offense to step up. The offense finally steps up, and then the wheels fall off on defense, and it's happened in so many games this year, and it didn't happen in Wisconsin. So I felt, okay, we've turned the corner. Here we go. And then it happened again in this game. Is it lack of focus? Is it lack, again, I don't like what he did when he went into the $3 down and played so far off. I thought that, at the end of half, that was a bad decision. Cost him 7 points, probably cost him the game, and I shouldn't say that. It cost him the game in that,
put them in a very tough spot.
Him in a tough position. It really did. They were in the game only because of the defense. So you got to give them all the credit in the world that they were in the game only because of the defense. But the defense also put them in jail at the end of the game when it just didn't have to be. And I don't know the answer to that, Jamie. What do you think?
I really don't know either. But I think if you look at this game and that Florida State game, it's him, and what they're doing on defense and getting away from what they're, like what I said, they're getting away from what they do best. And to me, like, anytime you're saying Isaiah Foskey, you saw the difference that the guy can make off the edge. Anytime you're taking that guy away from the edge, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing. So let your best players put them into the best position and don't put those guys in positions. And because even Foskey was rushing on some of those things, but he's rushing from depth. Yeah, he's not trying to beat a guy
from
off the line
linebacker depth. Was. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
So, like, to me, that is the main thing. I think because I get it. That's this scheme that he is like kind of the godfather of. He's the one who created this, and you see the success they still have running it at Cincinnati, and that's why. But Tressel didn't come in there. Mike Tressel's their defensive coordinator, took over there. He didn't come in and say, well, I mean, guess what, guys? We're playing 4 down. No, he played. That's what they got, and that's their scheme. And they have some new wrinkles, but they're played pretty much the same scheme that they've run under Freeman. So I think that's the thing is there's a balance there. And I'm not saying you want to just blow up Dollar and get rid of it, period. But stick with they're just so much better playing 4 down. So stay there. I think the defensive line is the strength of the team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So let those guys cook, let them do what they're best at. And I think in a lot of those situations, like, you're going to be better. You're going to be better off in those situations. It's going to help you, I mean, that was a backbreaker. It was a backbreaker.
Totally was. Chris, go ahead.
As a defensive coach, and you have, you have one great D lineman, you aren't going to just put him at one spot. I mean, you want to line him up at other positions because eventually they're going to chip him. I mean, you're talking about the end, So now you want to move him inside. You want to make sure that no one knows where he's going to line up, because he's going to blow past a guard this time and a tackle this time. But if you keep him at that one spot, eventually they're going to say, okay, well, he's their end, and they're going to use a guard on him and maybe a running back sometimes to not let him get through. But if I move him around, stand him up sometimes, put him back, then now they're not sure where he's going to be, or they are going to key on him, and now the offense has to key on him. So, I mean, it's really like a chess game,
I think that's totally fine, Chris, but keep him on the ball. Don't line him up off the ball. Like, just keep him on the ball. If you want to line him up in a 3-tech,
and they've done that many times before.
You want to do whatever. I'm cool with it.
They've slid a defensive end and a defensive tackle position.
Aquara just did it on the weekend before the Lions, right? So, and you wouldn't think that Aquara was a guy who could line up as a 3-tech, but he can do it, and he did it this weekend, lined up next to his brother, which is a pretty cool thing to see. Yeah. But I just think that situation, like, get him up front, and if you're gonna move him around, I'm all for that. I 100% agree, but just keep him on the ball. Don't let a guy like that, or even if you're going to play dollar, have him at one of the end spots, bring in another linebacker.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to take one more question here. I think this is a good one, Jamie. Hey, Mike and Jamie, is the loss of Maris Luafau beginning to show on this defense? And I think the answer to that is yes. But I think the answer to it isn't necessarily because, like, he would just be a difference maker. We know that he would be, but I think where they're missing Marist more than anything is the same thing where they missed Heinisch, and that is the juice that he would bring. That's a hype guy, and as Chris said early in the show, where are the guys who are holding people accountable? Where are the guys who have juice? Where are the guys who play with energy, slapping people on the helmet? That's what Maris brings, and he's not there. And Kurt Heinisch isn't there, and I think they really missed those guys, both those guys, in this particular game. And those are the guys you need in these big games, and just didn't have them.
Yeah, and I think Marist is a guy that if it doesn't matter what the score is, it doesn't matter if it's a walkthrough on Thursday or, it's a scrimmage during camp, or they're playing, top 10, they're playing USC, right? It doesn't matter. That guy has the same level of effort throughout that. And it's that kind of guy, it's infectious, right? And I think that's what they missed the most. Not to mention that the fact that, because Simon also got hurt, Bertrand has to play every snap. And
it's hurting everybody. Kyle Hamilton's going to wear down. We've already seen Michael Mayer, he's the walking wounded out there because he has to play every snap. You can't have so many players playing every snap. They're going to have to find some guys to give some of these guys a little bit of a breather. And, Michael Mayer wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play at all next week. That, he was trying to run and give it everything he had in this game, but he was done. He's hurt. There's no question about it. And, Kyle Hamilton is going to wear down. You can't play every snap, on defense. It's just almost impossible for those guys to do it. And it'll have its toll. You hope that you can get to the off week after Virginia Tech. Somehow you win this game against Virginia Tech. You get some guys some rest and that type of thing. But, then you got USC coming in. So there's no letdown after that. It's just, I don't know. You would hope that they would have more depth that some of these guys could play, and it's just not happening.
Jamie, you alluded to this before, but where are the guys that are like getting tossed out of practice and getting tossed out of games? Give me where's the attitude? Where's the guy like?
That's Jordan Botello. Jordan Botello. He didn't play today though. Really?
15 yard. Yeah. But he is definitely. I think Chris
Marist would be one of those guys.
Yeah, but once you see more Botello, he's gonna play more and more as the season goes along. That's gonna be your dude. You're gonna love this kid. He has that kind of thing.
You want the guys.
The problem is
you want a guy who starts fights at practice. You know what I mean? You want guys. You want guys who mix it up at practice. You know, even if it's his team.
Guy. Give me a mean guy. Give me
exactly.
A guy
yeah,
exactly.
You know, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and not just me, but I can't tell you how many guys back when I was playing, we got kicked out of practice, man. I mean, it was almost like a badge of honor. You know, Holtz used to sit us. And, you know, again, I mean, eventually we talked to us and I mean, everything was okay. But, you know, even in our national championship game, again, this is another shameless plug. I had Barry Alvarez on my podcast last week, and he talked about how we're in the remaining minutes of the national championship game, and we get like 4 defensive penalties because we're fighting. We're still like kicking guys' asses and spitting on them and trying to rip their helmets off and stuff. So, I mean, where are those guys? Like, I mean, I know it's changed a little bit, but like, come on, man.
Yeah. No, I agree. Need some of those. One last thing, Chris, you know, plug whatever you got, because I know you have the top 16 and all that type of stuff. Tell everybody where they can find what you're doing right now online.
Sure. So I mentioned my podcast before. You can just go to YouTube and put in Chris Zorich, and basically every Thursday I have a new show. I've interviewed folks from Joe Montana to Marcus Freeman to Barry Alvarez. I had Holtz on. It was a great interview. Also doing the Super 16 poll show, which is live Monday nights at 7:30 Central, 8 Eastern. And I basically rate my top 16 teams. And the reason why I do that, I don't just think that I have this huge ego. I think that I know what the hell I'm talking about. But I was fortunate enough, the Super 16 poll is a relationship between the Football Writers Association of America and the National Football Foundation. And so there's about 50 of us that vote each week to give them the top 16 teams in the country. And I was fortunate enough to be on be one of the voting members this year. And so every Sunday morning I have to submit my ballot. And then on Monday nights, I have a show about it, talking about each of the teams, and obviously going to talk about Notre Dame. And although I wasn't supposed to be watching the Oregon-Stanford game, Oregon lost in overtime. So I'm also going to talk about that as well. So if folks want to check it out, just go to my YouTube page or just look up Chris Zorich on YouTube.
All right, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. You did a wonderful job, and I hope everybody enjoyed our first YouTube Live. I think it went really well, and we're looking forward to it next week. And we'll be on right after the Virginia Tech game. Probably won't be as long because it'll be a night game, but we'll be on and we'll talk about it. And gosh, let's just hope they win. Let's just hope they win. Excited to see how they finish and what they can fix between now and then. Thanks again, Chris. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming on. If you haven't,
yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you and Jamie for having me on.
No, great, fantastic.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. If you're still on the YouTube watching live, there's a subscribe button. Click on that, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.